Welcome to Stay Home, Stay Focused. I'm Jack Moline. I am the president of Interfaith Alliance, and today I have to clarify the national organization, Interfaith Alliance, because my guest today is Connie Ryan, who's the executive director of Interfaith Alliance Iowa, one of, if not the strongest chapters that we have, strongest affiliates. And Connie is with me today from her home in Des Moines. Connie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. First question that I ask of every guest, how are you doing?
I am doing great. You know, working remotely is a very strange thing for those of us who work in offices and in the community and have very, very busy lives normally. So in a way, it's a little bit nice just to kind of do your work from home and do it at a slower pace. But I miss the things that have obviously been disrupted as well. So.
And you are you're the only person living in your residence right now, is that right?
I am. It's my dog and my cat and me. So that makes it easy. I don't have to care for children. I look at some of my friends and my neighbors who have little ones, and that's a really hard thing to manage, to work and to have to manage all of that.
Sure. Connie, tell us a little bit about Interfaith Alliance Iowa, just for the viewers and listeners who are unfamiliar.
Yeah, so we are an affiliate of Interfaith Alliance. We have been around for 24 years. I think we're one of the oldest affiliates.
I think that's right.
Yeah. And we do a broad spectrum of work, just like the national office does, maybe a little bit broader. We do a lot of political work at the intersection of religion and politics, obviously, not only from an educational standpoint, but also lobbying at our state legislature is a big part of our work. That's obviously been disrupted as well. And so we do work across the state of Iowa in communities and on issues that impact everyday Iowans.
So we're all needing to define what we're able to accomplish in these circumstances. What are you and Interfaith Alliance Iowa focused on right now?
Yeah, so we've had to look at kind of our scope of work and how we do that work. And obviously a lot of that's been moved to online. So a lot of our work is collaboration with a lot of different organizations. So that's been moved to Zoom meetings and those kind of things, just like everybody else. We also like to do things where we connect folks. And so we've looked at opportunities of how we can do that. So we created an ability for folks to connect via Zoom on a regular basis. So every Thursdays now, we're going to do what we call connections, and anybody can log into that and be part of that. Yesterday was our first, and so we had a great conversation about the impact of COVID-19 and social distancing. So that was kind of the focus. On Monday, we're going to have a Facebook Live conversation on a more political issue around abortion, because our governor tried to use COVID-19 to ban abortions, medical abortions in Iowa, and that very quickly went to the courts and was resolved Wednesday. So we're going to talk with the leader of Planned Parenthood on that issue. And then today we're sending out an email. We kind of are collecting stories we wanted to highlight the good things that are happening, the inspiring things that are happening. And so we're collecting stories of what's happening in communities. And so an email will go out each Friday. So doing things in a very different way, but also trying to still maintain the work that we normally do on the political side of things and the issues that matter to our organization.
Yeah, we've been having discussions of what our agenda should be and what we should be pursuing and how in the national office as well. And one of the things we're trying very carefully to respect is not to just make work for ourselves so that we look busy, but to find different ways that we can continue to pursue the agenda that we've set for ourselves of protecting faith and freedom. So it's going on all over the country. You have a weekly or a monthly program, you'll remind me, called Mosaic that brings people together as well, right?
Well, Mosaic is our weekly newsletter. The monthly event that we have are two, actually. In Des Moines, we have a monthly luncheon called Crossroads. In Cedar Rapids, which is another town in Iowa, we have a monthly luncheon called Intersections, and that really is about civil dialogue, and we highlight a new issue each month. Obviously, those we've had to put on hold because those are in-person gatherings and can have 75, 100 people in the room. So that's partly why we created some of the other ways that people can connect. People were asking us, how do we still have these conversations and how do we still connect? And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to do that as well.
Well, I apologize for getting your active programs mixed up, but I'm glad to see that you are making good use of the logo that we use, which is the mosaic. When I had my visit out to Iowa earlier, I first of all had the great experience of being able to visit the Iowa Cubs Stadium in Des Moines. But also to visit your group in Cedar Rapids and to talk with folks in the Des Moines area. You're one of our few affiliates that actually has subgroups, that has chapters. Are the issues different in different parts of Iowa, or can you do most of your work from Des Moines?
We do most of our work from Des Moines. We certainly travel to make those connections with folks, and important to be with folks where they are as well. But yeah, the issues really are universal. So we do a lot of work around hate and bigotry and being a voice to say that's not okay in our state. And so that in Des Moines, Iowa, looks pretty much the same as in Cedar Rapids or Waterloo or Washington D.C. And so stepping up and being that voice of how can we stop hate and bigotry. So that's a piece of the work that we do a lot of the time. Obviously, that intersection of religion and politics and religious freedom, that looks the same pretty much anywhere you go. And so challenging those voices of extremist voices is a piece that we often do. But it's also giving the tools to empower people to use that information and to do that in their own communities as well. So that's important as well.
One of the most important segments of your work, which you mentioned, is your work with the state legislature. Does the Iowa legislature meet year-round, or is it an abbreviated meeting like it is in Virginia here?
Thank God it does not meet year-round. It gavels in for the year in January, and they get paid, depending on the session, either 100 or 110 days, but they're not mandated to quit at that point. So the middle of March, they suspended the legislature. They were not done yet. And the only thing that our legislature has to do is the budget, and all the policy bills are just kind of icing on the cake. And so they had not gotten to the budget process yet. They were still really focused on policy bills. So we're not quite sure. They've suspended till at least the end of April. We're not sure what will happen when they do eventually come back, and if they'll take up any policy bills or if they'll just do budget.
What were the policy issues that you were focused on during the beginning of this session?
Yeah, there actually were a couple of good bills. So and they could still go through. One is Iowa is also one of the only states, I think the only state, that bans felons from voting once they get out of prison. And so we were working on a constitutional amendment with a whole lot of other organizations. ACLU was really leading that charge. So had made good progress on that. So would love for that to continue to move forward so that when people are done with their time, that they can become active citizens again and vote. They should have the right to do that. So that's a good piece of legislation. A lot of bad legislation. We had, I think, 14 anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation this year, just a whole gamut of
14.
14. Huge array. And again, working in collaboration with our largest LGBTQ organization, One Iowa, the ACLU, just a lot of different groups. We have had a constitutional amendment to ban abortion outright in Iowa, and hopefully that will not proceed when they come back. Just a whole scope of, we've had RFRA bills, just a whole scope of legislation that could really harm a lot of Iowans. So hoping none of that will continue once they return.
And you have some interesting characters who hold office in Iowa as well. Probably the most notorious one on the federal level is Representative Steve King. Do you have any interaction, any hope of dialogue with people who are mostly on the other side of the aisle from you?
I have really good dialogue and good relationships with folks in the state legislature. A lot of folks in the state legislature who are on the other side of issues than we are, and we work really hard to build relationships. I can't say that of all of the folks in the legislature, but we work hard to be able to have conversation, and doesn't mean we're going to move the needle, but you have to have those conversations and build those relationships with folks. I don't have any relationship with Representative Steve King, and we don't do a lot of federal work in the first place, but we do have good relationships with some of the other congressional representatives from Iowa, and so we can. When you all send us information, we can shoot information to those folks. Representative King is a hard nut to crack. So.
Sui generis, we like to say. I asked you that question, Connie, and you gave a great answer, because on a national level, it's a little hard for us to develop these kinds of relationships with the people who really make the difference. It's really something that needs to be done on a state, and even on, more importantly, on a local level. People who are watching and listening should be developing relationships with the policymakers and the opinion leaders in their communities. As you said, even if you're not going to move the needle, it's important to keep those lines of communication open, because when you're elected to office, you represent all of the people in your constituency and not just the people who voted for you. So you guys are a great model of that, and in what you're doing in your work with the legislature. You have been with us for quite a while. I would say the number of years, but then people will know that you began working for us when you were still underage.
Right.
But one of the things you've had great success in doing is expanding the reach of the local affiliate to other faith communities and to other communities of conscience within Iowa. If there were people who were looking to generate interest in an affiliate for Interfaith Alliance, where would you suggest they start?
I think you have to start with what you know. And I wasn't part of the beginning of this affiliate, right. and I've been with the organization 18 years. So I'll put that number out there.
Okay.
So I think you have to start with what you know, and you have to build kind of the core of your reach, and who are those folks who are the likely folks that can be part of that. But then it is about building relationships. All of the work that we do is about building relationships. And so whether that is on the political end of the spectrum, or whether that's on the faith end of the spectrum, or where that meets in between, and not forgetting also people, we have a large group of folks who are of no faith. And however they define themselves, or whatever title they put on that, that's important to us, because religious freedom is about the whole spectrum and the whole part of the puzzle, so to speak. And so you build those relationships. So finding those folks who are with you, but then building out from there and building those relationships. The other thing I would say is integrity matters. And so we do this work, and this is important to me at the State House in particular. And so if I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it. And how you approach people and approaching people with civility and integrity is really critically important in this work. If people can trust that you are going to do something and they know where you stand, then that goes pretty far.
And knowing your capacity as well, because if you make a promise of something that you can't deliver on,
Yeah,
your intentions may be good, your integrity may be intact, but it's not going to give you any credibility.
absolutely, absolutely.
So if you were looking to expand into, you mentioned Waterloo, Mason City, Keokuk, wherever it was, would you start by looking for an issue and gathering people around it? Would you go first to clergy, or would you seek out a friend or an acquaintance who could gather like-minded lay people?
So I'll give you an example. When we wanted to create connections in Cedar Rapids, where we have a monthly lunch and have had for 7 years, I think. Um, Actually, Welton Gaddy, your predecessor, was coming to Iowa, and we asked him to speak not only in Des Moines, but also in Cedar Rapids. And out of that, so we had an event. Out of that, we found the folks that really were most interested in having an ongoing conversation. And so we built a team in the Cedar Rapids area of folks that just wanted to have a conversation with us. From that group, the monthly luncheon was created. But it was important to us that we had a team in the community that knew their community, that had the connections, and understood the importance of the work of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. And it's not about us just going in and just dropping in and
Right.
saying, here we are, but really building relationships within those communities. You can't do work as a state affiliate that is covering a state like Iowa, that it is very different in different parts of the state, rural and urban and all of that. You can't do that from one place and expect people to listen to you if you don't go and build relationships.
So this is really good information for people who are in their homes now and thinking about how they might be able to change the landscape when these restrictions are dropped, to begin to think about who they know and what the issues are that they care about, and especially if they are in the lane of protecting faith and freedom, protecting conscience, and the integrity of government. If they're thinking about these things, you've given them a good start of the lists that they need to begin to make and the phone calls that they can make even now for when we're all free to gather again in groups of more than just a few. Connie, before we go, I want to ask you what I ask each of my guests, which is, if you were to recommend one thing to people sitting at home looking to be inspired and energized beyond the immediate concerns with the coronavirus, what's the thing you would recommend that people do?
I would say look at the small acts that we are seeing in our communities, in our work. The leaders are taking action that are big and significant, but what's happening in your everyday life that really matters. So it's the neighbor who sends you a text message, and says, hey, I'm going to place an order for groceries. Do you need anything? It's the long lost friend who calls you and says, I just wanted to check in on you. So remembering what that feels like, and the relationships that are so key in that, and taking that with us, that this has had a huge impact on our lives, but there are good things that have happened that we can take with us when we get beyond the coronavirus.
Well, Connie, I will tell you, I hope in these 20 minutes, the people who have been watching and listening have discovered why I consider you to be such a dear friend and an important ally. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And I encourage you to take care of yourself, to take care of business, and to everybody listening at home, stay safe.